some people and a good read, I hope, for everybody else. And thank you for having me. After that extended infomercial, I'll sign some books if you want them, if you have questions. Yes, ma'am.
I have not read the whole book, but I looked through parts of it, read chunks of it. There's a collection of prayers from people who were angry. Where did those come from?
Well, you want to hear a funny story about life at the Episcopal Church? So, I have a, I'll make this quick, when I was going through ordination process, through a couple of different twists and turns, I was writing this book. I was rewriting these prayers. And I was at a conference, a discernment conference, where, many people are to determine their future. And I shared one of these prayers. And they freaked out. It's not any of the ones I've talked to you about, but it was another one about a boy that had been bullied. And I'd written this from the standpoint of this teenage boy that I knew about who was being bullied at a religious school. And I just thought, that's got to be hard for him. And so I was sort of writing from his perspective. And my ordination got flagged on the basis that nobody could write what I wrote without having psychological problems. Now the irony of that, of course, was that all I had done was rewrite one of the Psalms as we talked about. So I was like, but it's in the Bible. And so it delayed things for a while for me while I was under an order to go see a psychiatrist. So I was. After that, there was some reevaluation of the church's at the time, when we still call it a diocese, the diocese position on that, and so I was given an opportunity when I was doing a project with when I decided to go down the diocese route, is that I set up a website and I promoted it around the country to get people to send in their angry prayers. It's called prayersofTruth.org. It's frozen. It exists, but only in such stasis. But that's where I collected it. And so for about a year, as part of a diaconal project, approved ostensibly by the diocese, I collected all these prayers, and I put the ones that were not the ugliest, some of the ugliest, but some of them were so amazingly raw that people just couldn't get their heads around it. You're reading it and you're just thinking, and these people were just so sad, or so much in pain about things that happened, and so frank about it that it made it hard for poor mental health. So not all of the worst ones are in, and that's the worst in terms of their language, etc. But many of them are. So there are a lot of we were collected on a website about 5 years ago. Question? Larry?
Have you ever pursued the concept of forgiveness as an antidote for anger, particularly in this concept of praying?
Sure.
In other words, oh God, help me to forgive that worthy black Ian for what he has
Written and brought to the lovely Fontaine. There's so many books on forgiveness. I have no problem. I'm a strong believer in slow to anger, quick to forgive. But that's not where these people were. Okay. And they're not, it would actually have been, I think, disrespectful for their situation if they had come to me and said, I'm so angry I can't pray. Forgive. You need to forgive. You try forgiveness. And I think that's actually, in a lot of cases, what they have heard. So this is not a panacea, but it's just another tool, I hope, for people that really need it. especially, by the way, people in recovery. This is something which has come up a lot. I'll be speaking to a recovery group, and there's a lot of anger. And it's when you're in a 12-step process and you're talking about forgiveness, some people mouth the words, but like the Nicene Creed, they may say it, but they may not believe it. Yes, other questions? This man in the back.
I'm curious to follow up with a question about how you got those prayers. Was the website set up so people just put them out there and that was it? Or once they had done that, was there some pastoral response?
I did not email back to everybody because the whole point was just say it, put more words down. This is not about me fixing you, or this is not about me healing you, and I wasn't trying to be a wailing wall in that way. What I wanted was just that one basic step of people getting it out of their system. And what I would get, and this was the interesting piece for me anyway, is that people would often send an email saying, I'm thinking about doing this. And so my pastoral moment was in encouraging them to go through with it and reassuring them that it's going to be okay. And that I'll publish it, I'll put it up on the website, I'll put it anonymously, but just here you go, here's your moment. And then they were back, well, I started, but I haven't finished yet. And so that was where really more, and so it's not, that was how I worked, if that helps.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I was never trying to manage what people were going through. And there's a thing about reconciliation that it really has to be organic. It can't be hasty. And this is just part of a reconciliation process. Hopefully one that, and what I encourage is that you write your prayer and say it about 20 times. Might be surprised what it feels like after, number 10. And then after number 20, and then maybe you just don't feel like saying it anymore. You got it all out of your system. It can work. Anything else? Yes, ma'am.
So when you were formulating the concept for writing this book about being angry with God, how did you overcome your fear to do that? Because I know that when I shared, my experience, my personal experience of anger and antipathy with God, that, the fear response you get from people when you mention it to them is, oh my God, you can't say that.
Right.
Even though there is a biblical foundation for that, there's a human, experience piece. People feel it, but they don't talk about it. How did you find the courage to go ahead with writing an entire book about the P word?
Yeah, well, mostly, first of all, because so far the pages in my Bible haven't exploded in fire yet. and it comes down to it's from thousands of years, so it must have a value. Can't we presume that if it's in the Bible, it's there to help us? And if it's there to help us, what can we take from it? Now, there are some theologians, by the way, and I quote one in the book from about 120 years ago, Matthew Henry, who was saying these were aberrations, these were mistakes. They got left in the Bible by accident.
By committee?
Yeah. So, I think that was part of what I just sort of thought, I'll just boldly go down this way. And, I suppose I could have published it myself, but it really was coming down to is if there's a role for this, then it'll find its own way. And I wasn't having to worry about trying to manage that outcome either. And then just sort of a broader sense, of all of my many problems, being fearful is one of them. Which creates its own problems for me. But I really don't think ahead like 20 squares and try to anticipate all the things that could go wrong.
So I take it they unflagged your ordination.
Yeah. So I think that's where, to me, you just kind of have to, as Martin Luther said, if you're going to sin boldly. So, that's where there are no variations. There's no degradations of that. It's all. And I have to say, I feel pretty good about the fact that as soon as I started it, the way people responded made me feel like I was on the right track.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
I'm staring at the title of your book, and I'm remembering a classic of my mother's, Happy Mother's Day, when she would say to her 5 little brats, "Now look what you made me do."
Right.
It was not okay for her to feel angry. It was not okay for her to feel angry at her God. And it's also sexist.
But it's your fault.
Yes, exactly. But it's also sexist too. It wasn't okay for a woman to feel angry.
Well, I think you look what you made me do cuts across both lines. And I think that sadly you have a lot of men who are abusers. Anybody who's an abuser might say, you know, I don't want to do that. You're making me do this. Right? I mean, that's a line that I don't think that's foreign to anybody who's ever been in that situation of, you know, I don't want you. This is going to hurt me more than it hurts you, or whatever. All those lies that we tell to contextualize the fact that we're not, some people aren't good at processing their anger. And this is about learning to get real with anger. Because sometimes anger is good. Anger's not always wrong. It's not always bad. It can be virtuous. If we didn't have anger, we wouldn't have the civil rights movement. Right? We didn't have anger, there wouldn't have been, in my opinion, an uprising that said no to this amendment. No. This amendment's stupid. No. But that took some anger, some righteous anger. Not mean, not destructive, not one that attempted to tear down, but one that attempted to build up. And so that's how we should always measure its value. Yes, ma'am?
Doesn't a lot of this anger and hurt come from putting expectations? We expect from God, we expect from our parents, we expect from people in our lives, we expect from politicians, and we, you know, other people expect things from us also, and we're all let down. Doesn't it all, and get angry and hurt because these expectations...
If we just lowered our expectations, we would be much happier. I think you can make an argument. I really do. I'm not being facetious. I think that you can make a real argument for that. But I think there's also a big piece. Anger is almost always tied to respect, in some form or another. It's feeling disrespected. It might be rightly or wrongly. I think that anytime you experience, but wait, this isn't what you told me. There's an element to that that's expectation, but some of that's also respect. You said this was the rule. I lived by that rule. Now you're telling me it's more of a guideline? You know, you didn't give me that option as a kid. You didn't tell me I could or could not follow that rule. It was up to me. You told me this is a rule. And if X, then Y. If I do this, then that will happen. And now something opposite has happened, and you're telling me I should never have expected that. I think you're right about managing expectations, and I think that's good, that's intuitive. But I think that the core to that, the real theme to that is respect. And some of that is just the respect that we need to be honest with ourselves. We have to show a lot of self-respect about how we're feeling and feeling the right to express it, to question authority as we're growing up, and to do that respectfully and to not do that angrily as well. And I think that's some of it. It's all about learning to properly put anger in perspective. Well, if we can leave a little time down here if you want to. Susan is here to if you want to buy a book from the bookstore. And then I'd be happy to sign it.